Okay, so different joints on a rabbit. This has now been washed and prepared, ready to go. It's all nice and clean inside. We've got rid of any nasty bits. Okay, a little bit of fat left just there. Okay, so to break down the rabbit, we've got to separate it into its main joints. And the first joint that I'm going to take off is the shoulder. Okay, so by removing the shoulder, we can see, a bit like when you've done your legs of lamb on level 2, we've got a shoulder blade here and then the elbow joint. Yeah, it's a lot smaller than your legs of lamb, I'll admit. Okay, but this is not actually joined by any bone, it's all joined by muscle and cartilage. Okay, the shoulder.
I don't know.
Okay, so just by coming up, you see I'm lifting the shoulder blade. Okay, and I can go in behind it with the knife and scraping against the bone. Okay, and these are excellent, very chewy, so if you're stewing them you don't get much meat off of them, but they're excellent for things like confit, and then you can shred it, put it in ravioli or something like that. Absolutely beautiful. So slow cooking method like confit or something like that. Absolutely beautiful for that. Okay, next thing I'm going to remove are the legs. Now when it comes to the legs, because a rabbit hops, it's got a sort of double jointed hip. Okay, and it needs a lot of power in its legs. That's why you can see how much muscle and flesh there is on its legs there, as opposed to its little shoulders at the front. Okay, because it hops. So it's got a double jointed hip. So what I've found there, where my finger is, I can feel the hip bone. All right, and if I was to go behind the hip bone there, I would hit that double joint, and it'd be really, really difficult to get to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the hip bone, and I'm going to scrape against the front of the hip bone. Okay, to get down there. And then I can pop the leg out, the same as you do when you're doing a chicken leg. Okay, now I can actually carry on scraping against the bone. You can actually see that there's a separate bone in there. There's one joint and there's the other. But trying to get down the back of that is a nightmare. Okay, so same this side. Can feel where the hip joint is. I'm going to go just in front of it. Okay, pop the leg. Okay, and then we can get the two legs off. And again, this is really good. You can dice it, you can casserole it, things like that. You'd want a fairly slow, wet cooking method for using the legs. Why is that? Because it's tough. Yeah, it gets used a lot, so it's tough. Okay, now we get to the other little bits. So, what we've got under the underside, okay, as we've talked about with any animal, what do you think this little muscle down here is? No? Loins down here. Stop shouting out random words. If you don't know, ask. So, anybody? These are the loins, the same as when you've done loin pork the other week. It's down the outside of the backbone. What's on the inside of the spine? The fillet. Okay, so the fillets on a rabbit are very, very small. Okay, but there are two of them, so I can remove these out. Okay,
That's a fillet.
that's a fillet.
Oh my god, that's tiny.
Cool. Well, it's not exactly a large animal. Okay, so there are two fillets, one either side of the spine, which can come out. They're really nice for strips and pan frying and things like that. Okay, and we've got these bits that are the breast. Okay, now I'm going to cut the breasts off, and then I'm going to add them in with the shoulders when we're confying them, as they're nice. But if you were making a rabbit ballotine, what I would be using is the whole of the saddle, and I'd bone it out, and I'd leave this on attached, so that I've got something to put the mousse in and wrap it all back up. But for now, on this one, we're actually going to remove the breasts off of here up until I get to the rib cage and take it off. So one. So you can call it the breast like we do on lamb, or it does, yeah.
Tiny and the legs are just like.
Yeah, that's where all the power is, isn't it? Okay. So what we've got in here then, okay, is this middle, all right, which has got the two loins on. Now, as I said, it's got a double jointed hip bone. It's also got a double spine on a rabbit. Okay, because obviously the power that it needs to hop around. So what I've got to do, when I go down the backbone, either side, I've got to go down two sides of the backbone. So the first thing I'm going to do is go all the way from the shoulders down, and my knife is actually in the middle of the spine at the moment. Okay, coming down here, and I'm going to expose it on both sides. Okay, go all the way up into the shoulder. But now we've got this second ridge on the backbone. What I'm going to do with my fingers is actually pull the flesh over it so that I don't get any wastage, and go down the second part of the backbone. Okay, so I'm pulling the meat away from it, Going down the
Wastage
second.
on a rabbit, you'll have nothing left.
There's very, very little wastage on a rabbit.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to just ease it off of the bone, starting by going around the rib cage.
She had fillet in that one.
You say that, Chris, but you can actually use a filleting knife for the next bit that I'm going to do if you wanted to. Okay, so I've got to where that ridge of the hip bone is again now, so now I'm going to go down behind the ridge bone, the hip bone, to actually get this loin out. Okay, so that's a rabbit loin. Okay.
And they're good for pan frying as
Same.
well.
They're good for pan frying, they're good for wrapping in pancetta and pan roasting and then slicing onto a plate. You can serve this slightly pink. Yeah. So here again, I've gone down one side of the backbone, I'm pulling away this this bit of flesh from there, and I can go down the outside of the backbone on here. To get as much meat off of here as I can. Once again, there's my hip bone, so I'm going to go down behind it to loosen this out by scraping down the bone. Removed another loin. Okay, now the loin's got this bit of sinewy stuff on it, okay, which we can get quite a bit off of with our fingers, but we want to get rid of this sinew. So a couple of ways of doing it. One is we can go from the middle, go underneath it and gently work our way out, but notice how I'm slightly lifting the knife blade up so that I'm scraping underneath it and I'm not getting loads of rabbit loin wastage left on the sinew. Okay, that's one way. The other way is to actually, this is the bit, Chris, where I said you could use a filleting knife, because you can almost do it as though you're skinning a bit of fish if you've got a good enough grip. Because you can just follow it along. Get it off like that.
Nice.
That's
So-
really smooth.
So that's what I'm actually going to do with this bit, because that's the way I prefer to do it, but it's whatever you're more comfortable with.
It's much quicker as well, isn't it?
It's quicker, but obviously you've got to work gently to remove it. As long as you get the sinew off, because it's really chewy and will never tenderise as you're cooking it. So basically, when you broke down a rabbit,
How many could you get served?
Two lots. I would possibly get 2 portions from a rabbit, because you could possibly confit this lot.
Just do like rabbit
Okay.
6 ways. 5
Or
ways.
a few ways,
Yeah.
a few different ways. You could confit that and perhaps put it in a bit of ravioli or something. You could wrap pancetta around that and roast it, or you could dice it and do a little stew. You could do some kind of a ballotine if you batted these out and wrap that around it and the fillet and some other stuffings. Okay, you could casserole the legs. You know, there's endless things that you can do really, and put different elements on the plate. Okay, but that's how you break down a rabbit.